going to wait a few seconds for some people to come aboard, and then we'll get started. Hi everyone, we're going to wait a few seconds for a few more people to join, and then we'll get going. All right, we'll let some people trickle in here, and we'll also be joined by Tatiana in just a moment here, but hello, and welcome to Glossy's weekly beauty debrief here on LinkedIn. We do this every single Wednesday, a quick 30-minute conversation between Glossy editors and reporters to discuss the latest in something going on within an industry or just news in general. So we're so happy that you're here today. I'm Lexi Lutzak, West Coast correspondent at Glossy, and I'm here with our senior reporter, Emily Jensen, and our managing editor, Tatiana Pyle, will be joining in just a few minutes here. So today we are going to be discussing the latest news coming from the world of fragrance. We have 30 minutes, so let's go ahead and jump in. Emily, you joined the team only a few weeks ago, and you've already had so many great articles, including 2 go live this last week that were all based around the fragrance industry. Let's talk about that first one, and that dives into the pricing increases happening in fragrance. I was so surprised to see some of those numbers, but tell us sort of what you discovered reporting this story out.
Totally. So I think just to kind of paint a bit of background, traditionally in the fragrance market, there's kind of been 2 big sectors. There's the designer fragrances, which are, like your Chanel, Dior, Tom Ford, the fragrance lines from those big fashion designers. Usually those have been priced at 100, 150, maybe a little higher. You can find them at all the department stores and airports. And then there's also been the niche side of fragrance, which not always, but typically have been from a bit smaller brands that are focused exclusively on fragrance. It's a bit more artisanal in its kind of image, kind of reaching people who are interested in fragrance specifically, a little more limited distribution, and they've been priced typically a little higher, maybe 180 and up, 250 maybe max. But in the past couple of years since COVID, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, fragrance has just been exploding. So many more people are interested in fragrance. It's not such a niche category anymore. And it's really that specific niche, more artisan brands that are really taking off. There's been big acquisitions in this space, Byredo was sold to Puig for $1 billion. Creed got picked up by Kering for also a few $1 billion. And since that's happened, these designer brands have now started upping their price points to kind of match that niche positioning. So Fendi just launched a fragrance collection last month, which each of those fragrances are $330, and they're available exclusively at Fendi boutiques and at Fendi's e-commerce page. Celine and Jersey Unknown have taken a similar strategy as well. And at the same time, some of these niche brands, they're no longer kind of capped at $250. They're pushing even higher to $500. Amouage, which is an Oman-based fragrance brand, recently launched an extrait version of one of its popular scents for $520. And people are buying these. Customers are more interested in these higher end scents. And we've also seen existing scents on the market really climbing up in price. Glossy research team looked into this and found that Tom Ford scents, for example, used to be $340. That same bottle is now $445, or whereas a Byredo scent used to be $180 pre-2020, now it's $225, which is, a pretty significant increase. But people are interested and they're willing to pay this money for fragrance.
Wow, so expensive. So expensive. I can't get over the jump of going up $100 for a bottle of fragrance that maybe you are replenishing. That seems like a huge jump. So is there sort of reasoning behind this? What determines the cost of a fragrance?
So it depends. I mean, there's a lot of factors. Like some of it is obviously just the raw materials, which there has been some, price increases on those if you're paying for oud or orris oil to be shipped from around the world. That comes at a steep cost. So there's the actual price of the juice, which might be a mix of like some of these high-end natural raw ingredients, but there's also usually a lot of synthetic ingredients that are made in a lab and are far more inexpensive. The cost of the alcohol itself. It's very expensive to make like a custom bottle for fragrance. So everything from the bottle to the cap, but obviously the packaging adds to the cost. There's also a lot of middlemen usually in fragrance, like a European brand when they sell in the US might be sold through a distributor that, takes a cut of the price as well. And then obviously to the retailer that takes another cut of the price. And then obviously just like the marketing costs and the advertising. Even if some of these niche brands don't necessarily have like the celebrity ambassadors with the $1 million deals anymore, there's still a lot of cost involved in terms of marketing it online. So there has been some increase in the maybe cost of raw materials that have driven the increase, but a lot of it too is just positioning. Like one expert I spoke to, she was saying, you never want to be in the middle when it comes to this product. You kind of want to be either at like the very accessible kind of mass end, or you want to be in the high end. And so I think these designer, more mainstream brands are realizing they don't want to be lost in the middle, and it's better to actually up the price of these fragrances to make it, more desirable, even if it is $100 more expensive.
Wow. And do we think that consumers are, it sounds like they're willing to pay for this. Do you think that consumers are just going to kind of buy the fragrances now? Like, do we think that the compliance with the consumers will be good?
I think we're still maybe seeing if they will, but I guess if you look at it in a bigger picture, like $300 is a lot of money for a beauty product, let's say, like compared to a lipstick or a face cleanser, like that's enormous. But if you compare it to the cost of like a designer bag or a pair of shoes or a dress, it's actually very accessible and affordable. So it kind of depends maybe what lens you're looking at it through, like is this worth it or not? If you want like a piece of Fendi or Dior, this is still something a reasonable everyday person could save up and buy. And I think we might see more brands kind of inflate their prices to kind of seem more desirable. Will consumers keep going back to that fragrance? As you said, you might go through a fragrance in a year. Are you going to purchase it again if you don't feel that $500 was worth it? Maybe not. So we might see in the long term, maybe some of these increases don't survive. But on the whole, what I'm hearing from some of these brands and audiences is that they are interested in these fragrances, even if they're obscenely expensive. A lot of you have probably heard of the Maison Francis Kurkdjian scent Baccarat Rouge 540, which I smell at every like fashion week party I go to. It's like $300 plus per bottle, but it's one of the top 5 fragrances searched for on Google, according to data from Statista. So people are interested in it. There are also, though, a lot of dupe brands whose whole business model is making cheaper copies of these fragrances for like under $100, which again, people might go to that. They might try those and realize it's not as good as the real thing. So we'll see. We'll see if people keep buying their $300, $500 fragrances every year.
Yeah, it really does track with the whole trend that we've seen with designer products. You see a line of people outside Chanel, and a lot of them are going in to buy the makeup or buy the fragrance because it's so much more attainable. And of course, like we see pricing going up across the board. I know that, if you buy a pair of like Gucci socks, that's more than $300 for a pair. And how many times can you wear a pair of cotton socks before you destroy them? And so I guess if, you're wearing this every day and I guess that consumers, I've justified it in about 30 seconds, so I'm sure that consumers can also justify it if it's like, something that they really want and they want into that designer world. And yeah, that's so funny about the Baccarat Rouge 540 because I've just been, I guess, sort of like just watching the discourse happen online around that fragrance and talking about how it's the smell of New York and all of that. So, So iconic, I would say.
Yeah, totally. And that used to be like a niche brand that maybe only a select audience would have been interested in, but now that's the mainstream audience reaching that. And people are also interested in having like a wardrobe of fragrances now. It's not necessarily just like that one special occasion thing you wear to nice dinners or, fancy occasions. It's like an everyday thing for people now.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this was very much about that designer, that high end, letting people know you smell like, the fashion house that you identify with. But let's talk a little bit about other roles that fragrance plays. The other feature that you put out in the last few days was about how fragrance brands are really tapping into the feel-good effects of fragrance. Another big marketing and talking point in beauty about how the products make you feel. So what did you sort of uncover in this one?
Yeah, so very kind of different side about like what makes a fragrance desirable. And there's been a lot of launches this year that are trying to tap into this wellness aspect with fragrance. And it's kind of two ways that I've seen them do it. One is like what Charlotte Tilbury did with her expansion of fragrance this spring, where she's launched a series of scents that are designed specifically to trigger certain moods using neuroscience-backed technology. In her case, that was developed by IFF, which is one of the big fragrance manufacturers. Givaudan is another big manufacturer that's been doing research into neuroscience for like 30 years and kind of showing like this particular aroma chemical triggers relaxation or excitement in the brain. Therefore, we'll put it in this fragrance and we can market it as delivering that effect. So that's kind of one side. There's other ones where it's more of just a general vibe of sort of wellness and feeling, like Sniff, which is a more affordable D2C fragrance brand, teamed up with the wellness influencer Alex L to create this scent called Healed Away. That, again, it's more about kind of the moment of using it for self-care. Bella Hadid's Aurabella, which came out this year with those trio fragrances, similar kind of idea. She kind of promises it as like boosting your aura. And Aurabella as well does have like a partnership with nonprofits. They've said they will donate 1% of all net sales to, a couple different smaller nonprofits that Bella Hadid works with. So it's kind of multiple ways brands are going about this. But it seems to be very much a trend that's ongoing that, as we've seen in beauty as a whole, there's like this huge demand for products that don't just serve their primary function of making you smell good or look good, but make you feel good on the inside.
So interesting. I thought that this was going to be mostly, before I read your article, I thought it was going to be mostly about, like the mood and the vibes like you were talking about here, but at the science side of things, that's super interesting. Yeah. And it's kind of it's both of them. I think both of these, like the vibe is also very important with fragrance. I mean, when you purchase something, even if it's not marketed as like a wellness feel good thing, I think you're always purchasing into a mood when you buy a fragrance. Like everything from the bottle design to the name to the marketing kind of is telling a story that is designed to evoke a certain mood, even if it's not positioned that way. Oops, sorry, I was on mute there. But curious, do you think that these fragrances that sort of promise these wellness benefits, do we think they actually work?
I think it depends how you define work. Work is a bit subjective in this case. Yes, with some of the yeah, exactly. I mean, with some of the ones that are working with this neuroscience technology, like yes, there is clinical testing to show like this smell does produce this effect. It's often a very short-term effect. Like if you smell it in that moment, yeah, it might trigger feelings of like concentration, maybe, or relaxation. The other ones that are more about this kind of aromatherapy feeling, again, that's a bit more of like a vibe. But one thing, I spoke to a psychologist who had said, the placebo effect is very, very strong, actually. And the power of suggestion is also very strong. So if you pick up a fragrance believing this will make me feel whatever, it will have that effect. Like it actually can have that effect, but it's something that you kind of have to believe it to feel it. Again, will that make you feel better in the long term? Probably not. Is it easier to purchase a fragrance to help you maybe feel more at peace and like booking an appointment with a mental health professional? Yes. And I think there's kind of a tricky line for some of these fragrances to walk as well in terms of like how much are they promising these benefits and when does it do more harm than good to like overpromise on a certain effect.
That's a really great call out. Who did you discover who sort of is the audience interested in these type of like feel-good perfumes, or who they're targeting in this like feel-good perfume marketing?
I think, in contrast to what we were just talking about, like these fragrances pretty much all tend to be in the pretty affordable range, like Orabella and Sniff. They're all like under $100 roughly. So I would say these are definitely targeting a younger audience, like a more Gen Z audience, which is, according to kind of experts in this space, like they're really looking for new ways to experience fragrance. They're not interested in this traditional like celebrity-backed marketing. And actually, one thing I found interesting is one of the experts I spoke to said that men are really interested in this idea of quote-unquote functional fragrance, which is kind of the category that these fall into, where it's not just an aesthetic thing, it's like giving you a certain benefit. So that I found really fascinating. But we'll see. Again, similarly, this has very much been a trend for the past couple of years, and I'm curious if it keeps going, if it trickles up to this kind of more higher end market, or if it stays in this more like affordable mass market.
Yeah, definitely. So interesting. Such great reporting on that one. All right, so let's shift gears a little bit and talk a bit about some new launches that are happening. Tatiana, I know you've been watching this marketplace. Can you tell us about any new buzzy launches or campaigns that you've seen recently?
Yeah, for sure. There are so many in these past 7 months alone. So I'll highlight some of the ones that I found to be most interesting. To start, Acme Studios, the cool streetwear type brand, they launched their first fragrance. They partnered with Frederick Ball, and they launched, I think it was in April. It's a very nice, clean, cool type of scent. I actually went to the launch party, and it was exactly what you would expect in a New York fashion scene type of event. There were so many fashion influencers there. I'm pretty sure I saw Paloma there. And it was a really nice, fun scent. And I think it was a really interesting choice for them to partner with Frederick Ball versus maybe a younger, edgier type of fragrance house. But either way, the scent smells fabulous. And then also, our favorite Gen Z brand, Sol de Janeiro, they launched a new collection of summer scents in that perfume mints category that they're really excelling in. I think that price point is around $30 to $50 for those scents. Really fun, quirky, beachy type of fragrances. And we talked about this earlier, but Tracy Anderson, the fitness instructor who's questionable exercise or routines have been going viral on TikTok, she got into fragrance and also launched her debut perfume and candle in the scent called Heartstone Rose and Vanilla. And those products range between $65 and $125. Really interesting move for her, especially given if I were a fitness instructor, I probably would launch more of a perfume mist or some type of deodorant type of product versus a candle and a perfume. But nonetheless, very, very interesting for her. And then lastly, just for jokes, Crocs and Bath & Body Works partnered and dropped a scented clog and sandal collection, which was very funny to me. Not quite sure why we would want our shoes to be scented, but I thought it was really fun and playful. Bath & Body Works continues to maintain its positioning in the market. I went to the Fragrance Foundation Awards a few months ago, and they have been nominated in a few categories. So it's nice to see a brand like that still, find new ways to connect with consumers in a space where, like Emily has mentioned, fragrance is ever evolving. You have the heritage brands or the prestige brands that are getting into the category again, or the younger, more niche, affordable brands getting, that younger consumer. So it was really interesting to see what Bath and Body Works is doing to kind of maintain relevancy.
That's so interesting. Are they selling the scented Crocs like at a Bath and Body Works store?
So I believe it's like a limited edition type of situation where if you get the fragrance, or if you get the Crocs, you get the fragrance. And I think it's only online. Online at Bath and Body Works and our Crocs.
Oh my gosh. Okay, wait, I just Googled it and they're actually really cute. They're actually really cute. They're like the Bath and Body Works blue gingham print.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
It's really interesting. I think, when we talk about fragrance, there's so much nuance to it when we get into, the legislation side of things, and then the cleaning side of things, and then the marketing side, having to market products that you can't use the main scent or your sense of or sense of smell. So I think it's a really interesting move for them because Crocs are, as we know, are one of the biggest shoes right now for consumers. So it was a really smart move for them.
That makes a lot of sense. Wait, so going back to the Tracy Anderson, that's such an interesting move. Do we know what inspired her to come out with a fragrance and a candle?
I'm not quite sure what inspired her to do it. I really think it was more so seeing a bunch of different brands or seeing a bunch of different founders kind of getting into this space. We've seen so many founders launch either body care or scented body care. So I really think it probably felt like a natural next step to her, especially given that she's really into the wellness, the fitness. It totally makes sense to really expand with fragrance.
Yeah, and it totally, I think, plays in really nicely to Emily's story about sort of feel-good fragrance and, connecting fragrance and that moment with something that is really great for your wellness, like a workout.
Absolutely. I'm so curious. Yeah, I'm very curious, once we kind of see how her brand particularly resonates with consumers when it's been out for a few months. Solely because, it's a higher price point. It's priced at, I believe, $125. And granted, her workouts are not on the low cost end either. So I'm really curious what type of consumer will be attracted to her scent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, super interesting. We're going to have to keep an eye on that one. Okay, so we have a few minutes, and I grabbed a couple news pieces that I feel like are super interesting right now around fragrance that I'd love to kind of run through. So both of these news pieces really go back to what Emily was talking about with sort of these big manufacturer juggernauts. As we know, as Emily mentioned, there's a handful of huge fragrance companies that are really controlling a lot of the market. So this one is about Swiss fragrance and flavor maker manufacturing Givaudan, which Emily mentioned earlier. And basically the logline here is that they're expanding their reach in the beauty industry by acquiring an Italian contract manufacturer called Bicolor. And basically Bicolor makes finished cosmetics, skincare products across luxury, indie, and consumer packaged goods. So they have their hands in just about all parts of the makeup industry, and they develop finished products. So this is really in line with the 2025 strategy to expand the presence in the beauty category for Givaudan. They are a very successful company. They announced in 2021 that they acquired 25% of the contract manufacturer Bicolor, and then this acquisition that just took place was the remaining 75%. So it's really going to offer the house this innovative option for taking makeup formulations and skincare formulations and really widening its capabilities. So for background, Givaudan has so many fragrances. They've in the past made fragrances for Versace, Ralph Lauren, Donna Karan, so many of the big houses. So I think that it's going to be a very interesting pivot for, truly one of the biggest fragrance houses in the world.
That's really fascinating. And yeah, as you said, Givaudan already has his hand across the whole perfume counter. With them purchasing Bicolor, what will that actually result in the coming years? Like, will we see products like coming out through them, or what can we expect to see?
Yeah. I think that the goal here is really like vertical integration for Givaudan. The company will be able to create finished cosmetics for its clients. So if a brand comes to them, like, we know Versace already has makeup, but like if a company like Versace were to come and say, we want to do another fragrance and we want to do it all at once with a hair care range, with a skincare range, with makeup, obviously coming in early and creating a full rollout plan and all of the products is much more beneficial to a brand. So especially when they can do that all under one roof with sort of one transaction, one big move, I think that's a big benefit for both the brand and also for that fragrance house, Givaudan. And I think this will just basically be able to make what they're doing easier and faster. Speed is going to be a huge benefit here. We see the, brands like e.l.f. bringing a product to market in like 7 weeks. And so this will help to kind of speed up the process of these big luxury rollouts. But another big advantage here is that Givaudan will be able to keep its cards kind of close to its chest. So anything it creates with a fragrance will now be able to will be created sort of behind closed doors a bit, with less of a transfer of the formulas and the fragrance recipes, which, we all know these things are considered IP by these houses, and even through MOCRA, don't have to actually be disclosed to the public, just FDA. So I think that will also be a really big advantage here. But that is not all the news from the biggest fragrance houses. So, Emily, I know you also mentioned IFF, International Fragrances and Flavors. So news from another one of the houses is that IFF, the story kind of started earlier this year, and the logline is really that the EU is investigating a suspected fragrance cartel, their words, not mine, including top houses like Givaudan, who we were just discussing. So basically, this story is so crazy, but basically in March, Givaudan said that it was being investigated by the European Union and Swiss antitrust authorities after the EU announced that it had raided several companies on concerns of a cartel in the supply of fragrances and fragrance ingredients. The UK has also jumped in. They have an agency that has also opened an investigation into the same sector, what's going on in fragrance. And then the latest news is that in June, the European Commission fined fragrance house International Flavors and Fragrances, I can never say that, IFF. So the European Commission fined IFF $17.7 million for an alleged antitrust obstruction that happened in 2023. And it's really, really simple. Basically, the commission alleges that a senior IFF staffer had exchanged WhatsApp messages with a competitor, and then during a commission inspection, deleted those messages. And you can't do that. So basically, we are seeing this whole entire story start to unfold. It's pretty wild. I mean, when we think about cartel, we think of drug cartels, but of course a cartel is really just an association of manufacturers or suppliers that really want to maintain prices and restrict competition.
That is so insane, and there's so much secrecy around fragrance, as you were saying, that maybe this isn't shocking that something crazy like this is happening behind closed doors, and it's so concentrated between just like a handful of companies. I'm really curious to see what happens with this, but do you know for right now, could this impact like fragrance pricing or availability, since, as you said, between IFF and Givaudan, that's like half of the fragrance market already?
Yeah, and my assumption is that the EU and these other countries that are, and these other, groups like the UK that are investigating, I'm assuming that all of the big fragrance houses are sort of like part of this, or at least like being looked into. From the news reports that I read, the houses are like fully cooperating, like they're saying they don't have anything to hide, of course. But yeah, it's very interesting. I think that IFF, their annual revenue in 2023 was almost $12 billion, which actually was a slight decline from 2022, but I'm so sorry, guys.
that was IFF, and then Juvidon, their annual income is almost $13 billion. So I don't know that like a couple $1 million fine is really going to make that big of a dent, but I mean, 170 million isn't nothing. Anyway, so I don't know, maybe, but Emily, based on your reporting, I feel like the fragrance pricing is much more about the market and much less about what's going on in the company, because the markups on these products are so huge anyway. So I don't think that this will be something that we're seeing too much impact the consumer market, but only time will tell. This might just be a flash in the pan kind of story, and it all sort of gets, settled. But of course, we'll know soon if there's any more headlines and anything new coming from the EU and the other agencies that are sort of looking into this. But that is about putting us at time here. Thank you all for tuning in and listening to our conversation about the latest happening in the fragrance industry. We will, of course, be back next week at the same time for another conversation, and you can check out all of the reporting that we talked about here, including Emily's 2 big deep dives into fragrance on glossy.co. Please check that out, as well as our other reporting, and we will see you again next week. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.